David Cay Johnston, who is a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist, professor at Rochester Institute of Technology, and author of The Big Cheat: How Donald Trump Fleeced America and Enriched Himself and His Family. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, David. So we've heard quite positive noises from Trump in terms of striking up a future trade deal with the UK. But we also know that he's inclined to say one thing and do something completely different or change his mind. You know, if you were a British politician, a governing British politician right now, how much weight would you be putting on those comments?
Oh, Donald is incredibly mercurial. He'll say one thing and 30 seconds later deny he said it. There is no core policy in Donald, who I've covered for 36 years, except for whatever Donald wants at the moment. And he's a bully, but like all bullies, he's also therefore a coward. Donald has called me or said to my face many, many times, I'm going to sue you. I'm going to take your house. I'm going to take everything you have. We'll put your kids out on the street, when he's furious. And I just look at him and calmly say, well, Donald, if you think you have a case, you should file it. He doesn't know how to deal with people who are not afraid of him. You're seeing this with the U.S. Senate right now. He has imposed an obedience test. He wants the approval of some of his cabinet appointments who are manifestly unqualified and in one case probably a serious threat to global security, to allow him to do what are called recess appointments so they don't have to have confirmation hearings. And everything Donald does is built on this expectation that you will fear him. And he's going to try and build that once he's back in the White House, because that's who he is.
And so do you think, with one of Trump's aides reportedly saying to the British government, look, you have to choose between, one of our key policies right now here in Britain is to try and foster closer ties to the EU. You have to choose between pursuing that and a trade deal with the US moving forward. Do you think that strategy is about using Britain essentially to kick the EU?
I think that's a false choice that's been presented. There's no reason to choose one or the other. Now, it's unfortunate, in my view, that the British people passed Brexit. That's already causing tremendous economic harm. But the British government should not ever cower. And it was wonderful in the precede that you brought up Hugh Grant's prime minister in Love Actually, because this is exactly the moment where fiction and reality meet.
Okay, so do you think that that's what our politicians should be doing? They should be standing up to Trump, and he would respond well to that?
Well, you don't need to provoke him to stand up to him. You just need to be resolute. Okay. Donald will react depending on how he feels in the moment. And, understand, I've covered the man for 36 years. I was the first person to write that he might become president of the United States. And that was back in 1988 and then again in 1992. And people thought I was crazy back then. Donald is an empty vessel. He's appallingly ignorant. He doesn't know things. He had to be told why there's a memorial over the USS Arizona in Pearl Harbor. He doesn't know anything. He tells you he's the world's greatest expert on 22 subjects, but he doesn't know anything. He's incredibly ignorant. And so in dealing with Donald, what you want to do is avoid unnecessarily provoking him. And when he is provoked, just sit back and wait. It passes. Donald is a master in a phone call of romancing you, bullying you, going back to romancing you, bullying you again. And you just have to be resolute and things will do okay. I have a bigger concern here, Natasha. Donald Trump is proposing that his director of national intelligence is someone who is, I think, a walking national security threat. Who, because of her conduct regarding Vladimir Putin and the dictator Assad in Syria, among other things. We have something called Five Eyes, this national security sharing agreement between the US, Canada, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, and Australia. With Donald Trump in the White House, I would expect that the Four Eyes will talk candidly to each other, but they are not going to share much with the United States because when Trump was in office before, just weeks into office, he had an unannounced meeting with the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov and the Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, and he gave sources and methods. That is, how did we get this and who did we get it from to them? And there was an interesting disappearance of a Russian right after that, a high-level Russian official. And the CIA, other journalists who cover national security have reported, had to run emergency actions to get undercover people or cooperating assets out of other countries. Donald Trump has no concept of why it would be wrong to tell national security secrets. And after he left the White House, he told an Australian businessman how close American submarines can get to Russian submarines before they're detected. He read from documents to some people working on a book, and there are filings by the Justice Department in the documents case in Florida that use hypotheticals, because that's how you do this, but those hypotheticals that need to be based in reality to have any effect strongly suggest that Donald Trump has sold national security secrets. And I wrote more than 2 years ago that he almost certainly has, because Donald does know one thing. He knows the value of things, and he knows the value of secret documents he stole when he left the White House.
I mean, that's absolutely terrifying. The other thing that I wanted to ask you is, so when I was on air last week, I spoke about my worst fears, both for the American people, but also for the world. And I spoke about the possibility of a vaccine ban and a total abortion ban, and also the potential not only cost, but the distress that would be involved with deporting 11 million migrants. And I was looking at some of the responses when that was clipped up and put on YouTube, and the majority of people seem to be saying, oh, it's fine. He won't do that. He just says things. And it very much reminded me of after Brexit, people were saying, well, they never would have let us vote for it unless they had a plan. But then it turned out that they didn't have a plan at all, and it was a disaster. So I wonder, what's your take on that? Do you think he will follow through on some of that more extreme rhetoric?
Donald will at least cosmetically do a big roundup of people in the United States. And to the extent that he goes after people who have committed crimes and are clearly subject to deportation, I don't think there'll be much of a kick about it. But rounding up 11 million people would take years. It would require the use of the military. It would require a massive ratting out your neighbor business of the kind we see in the old Soviet countries. And would cause an enormous spike in food prices in the United States. It's people who are in the U.S. without permission, who do most of the farm work, who work in the meat packing houses, and it would cause terrible disruption. So what I expect in that area is essentially a show of doing this more than a substance. And by the way, there are apparently about 3 million American citizen children whose parents are subject to deportation. The costs of putting them in foster care, because many of those parents are going to leave their kids in America for fear they'll never get back in the country, that'll be borne by local governments. And when people find out their property taxes are going up, they will scream about that. So food prices going up, property taxes going up. Donald will do as much as he thinks will not destroy him. Donald's very feral. So when he's cornered or he realizes he's outmatched, he finds ways to slip away. He's masterful at that, as much as he is, and I've called him this many times, the world's greatest con artist.